Hello. Now we seem to be working. This is the Goodwill, Northwest Ohio virtual classroom, and this is our first go at it. And today I'm going to take us through Microsoft Word, as you can see here. So, we here at Goodwill are all about trying to get people back to work, and one of the ways to do that is to be sufficient and efficient at navigating computers and technologies. And another way to go about that would be typing up resumes and cover letters. So really want to just get into navigating Word, using it to your advantage, maybe making a couple examples, and then for more information afterwards, you can always stop in. We'd be happy to help you with any of your future employment needs. So we'll just get into it now that we started a couple minutes late. You can see here that we do have Microsoft Word, and we are starting with a blank document. Alternatively, if you had something already, you could open a document, maybe like the bullet point of instructions I have that you can't see right now. And so here we are. We have your blank slate that you can start and do whatever you want. Now some people, depending on your situation, you might need to zoom in with something like the magnifier, as you can see in the bottom right of your screen. Zoom out, or anywhere in between. We'll just leave it at the base level for now. Other things you can do for your view that you might not know are going to be things like adding a ruler to the top, so you can set your margins and your spacing and make things look nice. You also have different ways to navigate through the pages, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But just as a quick, here's what we're looking at, this is what we need to work with. For that, we're going to go over most of the basics and see what all we can do for you, and maybe make some suggestions on your own papers, your resumes, or things like of that nature that you might be typing up. One of the main things is to use a proper font. So we have a large list of potential fonts, but our most common are going to be Calibri, which it starts out as, or even more likely than that is going to be Times New Roman. For anybody who's typing up a paper for school or something like that, this is going to be your bread and butter all the time, so always use that, and also use the 12-point font. From there, we have a lot of options in Word. So we have items such as bolding letters if you want to have a title for something, or maybe even your name. Hello, I'm Brian. I probably should have started with that. And we can bold that. We could also do some italicizing, like that, and everything in between. We also have underlining and things of those natures. Now when we're starting with a resume, one of the main things that we want to do is make a cover letter. A cover letter is going to be your name, a statement about why you want to work at the place you're working with, and you generally want to personalize it. It makes a really good first impression. So if we were to do something like that, we'd probably want to use some of these other items in this list up here, and this is all of our tools and tricks of the trade that we'd be looking at. So we may want to center, have your name nice at the top, like so. And we can use these other options up here, such as bolding it, or making it bigger or smaller. So we could have something like that. And then you just want to make sure that you change these settings as you move around, so that way the rest of the paper, or whatever you're working on, looks proper, it looks nice, it's appealing to the eye. And we can do things like that with these alignments. We have the center alignment, the left and the right. And those are going to be the ones that you mostly worry about. The justified is not used as often. But if we use the left, we have our name up there. Maybe we want to put in some of our own information, or our email address, our home address, phone number, things like that. And then afterwards you would write your letter. To, give a nice introduction to whoever you're requesting to speak with, make that first impression, and go from there. Now when it comes to the content of things like that, that is when you would speak to our workforce team, and they would be happy to help you out at one of our job connection centers that we have open in the Toledo area. But for now, if we did that and we had this cover letter set up, we can see what else we have going on. Give me just a second to pop this up. Okay. From here, if we had our nice little "to whom it may concern," and we're just using the enter key to make these spaces. I don't mean to make it too basic, but I want to make sure that we're hitting everybody who will potentially watch this live or as a video later on. You know, using your keyboard is your keyboard commands are very helpful. So something like just as simple as that enter key or the backspace key to navigate around is very important, something that you want to get used to. So from there we have "I'd like to work at your place of employment. Here are the reasons why, and why I think I would be a great fit." Obviously, you would put in a lot more effort into something like that for your own resume and associate cover letter that you would make per place that you apply to generally. And you want to end it there. And afterwards, we would want to give them the resume itself. Now, something we can do here with the rest of these nice buttons and options at the top here, going from the home to insert, and we'll just insert a blank page. And now we're here at the next page. Now while we were here, this is where we would want to start our resume, make sure that it looks proper, make sure there's enough white space, make sure that there's just an overall appealing view. That's going to be very common for any documents you make, especially if you're trying to showcase yourself. So you can see that we're already spaced in on the 1 inch or the half-inch margins, and from here we can start the real work. Now if I pull up my other document here and we just start, this is going to be a great example of using multiple pieces and parts of Word, which is why I'm jumping straight into it. We would again want to excuse me. We would again want to start probably with titles, and generally with titles you want to make them bold, you want to make them stand out. You could increase the font, the size of the font, so maybe something like 14, and we have work history. Keep in mind this is just an example. There are multiple ways to make resumes look nicer, better, and more fluid depending on what you have to put in there, but just use this as an example. So if we have our work history here, and then we want to switch that font back, we want to make sure everything looks nice, and let's just say we have job 1, and we worked at job 1 from February, let's go from January of 2018 to December of 2018. Again, just an example. From here we might want to list what we did there. Now a good part of listing is to use another one of these options up here. We have a couple different ones. The one for a resume is probably going to be your bullet section, and just clicking on that puts us in this little mode where we have a nice bullet point, and this is where you can highlight certain items rather than typing a paragraph of what you did or what your duties included. This allows you to just give the highlights, which is something that is easier to read for somebody who's going through potentially multiple resumes and you want to stick out. So you would use something like this to highlight the important parts, especially if they directly correlate or connect with whatever position you're applying for. So if we have this and we say that we did anything from office work, and we hit that enter, and we hit the enter key on the keyboard, and then it drops down immediately, and we did maybe some marketing research, just as examples. We hit that enter key again. Now, if we have something like marketing research or something bigger, maybe it's janitorial work, maybe it's lawn care, it could be anything under the sun. But if we want to maybe specify something that's more generic like that, if we hit the Tab key on the left side of the keyboard, it indents further and gives us a point that we can make under that bullet and make a cascading effect essentially of we get more and more precise if there's something that you want to highlight even further. So that is definitely something to keep in mind. If we go from here and from marketing research, we say developed new strategies, if I could spell it properly. So something like that, and now we have something that was very generic that can cover multiple talking points later on in a potential hopeful interview, but also gives a highlight of something specific that we did, and we can go further and beyond that as many times as you want to across the page, but probably once or twice is as far as you want to go, so that way it still becomes readable. That's very important when you're working with these documents. Oh, just a moment. Okay. Yeah, it has me live. Refresh the channel page. Okay. So from here, where are we? Where are we? Excuse me. From here, we have our very basic resume starting, and we have our bullet points listed. And if we hit enter past that, it will take us to the various levels of tabbing in through those bullet points. And if we go again one more time, we could get out of that, and then we could go to job 2, list when you were there, and then use those bullet points again. And you want to keep things in a consistent pattern, so that way it makes sense, and again, is readable for whoever is looking at what you're providing them. Now, if we go a little bit further with that, in terms of being readable and everything like that, one thing we want to do, like I did here when I accidentally had 2 I's in strategies while I was just typing normally, is we could go to our review page and check our spelling and grammar, and this will take us through the entire document, including my very Polish name, and it will give us spelling suggestions that you can either ignore if it's your name, because Microsoft or the computer might not know every last name, so those will probably be marked as incorrect even though you spelled your own name properly. But other words that you did misspell on accident, you can get the suggestions throughout the whole document while they're already underlined in red, so that way it's easier for you to see while you are typing. Using the review and the spell check of the entire document will make sure you don't miss anything. The last thing you want to do is send your document away in an email or something, or print off a whole bunch of copies of it, and then realize your spelling mistake that doesn't look as good when somebody's seeing your work for the very first time. You want to make sure you give your best foot forward. So we'll go ahead and change that strategies. It tells us that our grammar check is complete because we only had a few lines in here, so not a lot going on just yet. And from there, we are sure that we are working with something that gives us the best view of ourselves while we're showing this to somebody. The other thing we could do, very similar in this review page, is to use the thesaurus that a lot of people don't actually know is there, so it's very important to make note of. If you use the thesaurus that's still in this review panel, throughout all these panels in the top bar here, click on that review, go to the thesaurus, and if we have a word like employment, and we want to use a different word there, just as an example, we can just type that in over here on the thesaurus and search, and it will give us a variety of different words that we could potentially use, so that way you're not using the same word repeatedly, and to spice it up a little bit, make yourself sound a little bit more professional, potentially. You don't want to overuse it, definitely. You want to make sure your work is still readable and clear, but it's something to use if you feel like you're not using the best word, or if you want to make sure that your documents, even if it's not a resume, if it's a paper for school or whatnot, you want to make sure that you're using language that is clear, concise, but also comes through clear or properly to whoever's reading it. Now, just to make note, we do also kind of bouncing a little bit back and forth, but we want to make sure that we use as much of Word that we can. So we had the bullet points. We do also have the numbering. If you had events or anything like that, maybe you would use numbering. If you were listing off talking points, you could use numbering. If it makes more sense, you can use either or, but for the sake of resumes, bullet points are probably your better bet. But in the same fashion as we were talking about before, if we did office work, spelling it properly, and then hitting that will number it properly as you would assume it would. But if we hit the tab here, it gives us that same idea, just like the smaller bullet point here, to allow us to make everything readable and specify. Office work is a very generic term in our example here, but we could specify what we did in the office that might relate to whatever position you're applying to. So don't be afraid to use the numbering, but the bullet point is probably your better bet on that one. And then if we just hit the enter keys, we'll get out of that and be back to just typing normally, depending on whatever you're typing here. One thing you might want to type, probably closer to the top of the document, but wherever you choose to work it in, would be a type of work, employment, mission statement for yourself, to make sure that whoever's reading it, while you already showed them a cover letter, perhaps like we did at the start here, which again, you should probably be a little bit more specific than what I had here in the example, you would be able to showcase maybe a sentence or two about yourself that specifies, or that gives off a certain feeling that you have towards your work, that you're a hard worker, that you like to really get into things and find out everything you can, things of that nature, that would stand out. And if we did something like that where we don't use the bullet points, and we're just typing, it would be like we're starting a paragraph, though you don't want it to be too long of a statement generally. So with something like that, if we're starting that, we just want to indent, which is as simple as hitting tab, and then we have our indent, and we start typing, saying whatever you choose to type. I am a hard worker. And if I make any spelling mistakes, it's just to make sure that we use that spelling and grammar check later. I'm a hard worker that always tries my best and looks to... I'm not very creative. And looks to bring my best foot forward every day in the workplace. And now here we just have a sentence. We didn't have to use any fancy formatting, any bullet points, anything like that. We're keeping the same font because you want things to be consistent unless you're making a title or something to stand out, so that's important. And then if we hit that, that indent key, from there you space it however you want, and it's going to start like a paragraph. We don't need any special markings or anything like that. So from here, this would be your mission statement. And you could even title this if you wanted to. Again, just to keep on using these functions up here, because they're here for a reason. If we centered something and we said, my statement, or whatever you want to record it as, or title it as. This is just an example again. We might want to bold this, make it bigger. And you can see here what I'm doing, which I didn't go into, is that I'm selecting whatever I want to change. So you have two options to do this. We could either have our line here and then start by bolding it and making the letters bigger and centering it, and then typing in what we want to type. Alternatively, if we click and hold with the mouse and drag over, we can change everything we have selected all at once without having to delete anything, which saves you a lot of time on there. So if we do something like that, we could even highlight it with these other options up here. We could change the color of those words. Oops. Oh, stop highlighting. There we go. There we go. But you have a lot of options here is what I'm getting at. You could change the color of the lettering. Generally, you don't want to do that in a resume format, but the option is there. You can also add text effects, things like that. If you're getting a little bit more artistic, that would probably be more directed towards anybody still in school or anybody typing up documents in that sense. Or if you're making some type of signage or anything like that, you might want to use the word effects that will apply reflections, outlines, things of that nature to what you have. But again, the easiest way to do that would be to select what we want by just clicking and dragging, and then bolding it, underlining it, whatever you choose to do. We could even strike through it if we had something that we wanted to directly cross out but leave on the page for whatever reason. You have that option. The other things you can do with your keyboard is if you take your other hand and hold down the Control key and do something like Control and then hold the A button, or hit the A button rather, you'll select everything in the document or everything on a web page or anywhere else, but let's focus on Word for now. And you could copy that whole thing if you're holding that Control, and then you do C, and then the last button we have in this combo, remember we have Control A, Control C, then we have Control V, and it will paste everything you just copied. Now, we don't generally want to do the whole document, but if I wanted to, instead of typing something like office work twice as an example, say I didn't want to do that, I could just click and hold, drag over this, copy that with the Control C, and then I'll start my bullet point, and then I'll use Control V, and now we have the same thing here. This would be very helpful if you're reorganizing paragraphs, parts of the document. Maybe we want our statement about ourselves at the top of the actual resume. So we'll Control C, and then we can just delete that with backspace in the meantime. And then do the Control V, and now we have that at the top. We didn't have to type the whole thing again, which is really nice. Saves you some time when you're going through this or making changes repeatedly or typing up multiple documents. You don't want to do the same thing repeatedly if you don't have to. So we have that now, and let me pull up, what else do we have here? Other things we can do, now that we have a very basic rudimentary style of a resume, is that we might want to number our pages or add a header. These are very helpful things sometimes depending on the situation. So if we were to do something like that, we would go to the Insert tab up here in the top, and then go to one of these options over here. A header would be helpful if we want to do a specific title at the top of every page, if there's a reoccurring theme throughout the pages or the document, the paper you're typing, whatever it may be. Some of these will even have little effects on them if you want to add those. A lot of the times you will just want to use the basic ideas. So if we have header example, and then we close that, now every time we go to a new page, we'll have the header on every page. And then let's go back to that insert, open up the header again, and we can change that as much as we want to add in different items. Like if we didn't want the actual text here, text still there while we're going through here, we can do something like this. We can also change where it is on the page if we want to make it a little higher up or a little bit lower. Affecting these settings rather is not something that's often requested, but if it works better with your document, you do want to know that they're here. When we're in this header and footer tools, it will take us to a different page at the top here. You want to make sure, because sometimes it is confusing. So once we are done affecting the header, we'll probably just want to close the header and footer, and then it'll take us back home where we have all of our different text options just like we're accustomed to at this point, and we'll be able to go from there. Now, say we don't want a header, we don't have the title for every page or anything like that, but the professor, or for the sake of whatever document you're typing, suggests that you have a page number. We can put that in multiple positions. As you can see here, scrolling through the options, I'm not clicking on any of these yet. I clicked on page number, and then we go from here. So in the top right is a common place for something like this, and it will automatically put the page number. Now, for those of you typing a paper or something, maybe you want to put your last name there or something of that sort. Oh, disconnected. I think we're okay. Yeah, we are okay. Okay, sorry about that. So, regardless of what it may be, the header is probably more likely for a resume situation. The page number is more for a paper or document you're typing up, if requested. But let's again close out of here. So, oh, that got moved over to the side somehow. Let's top a page in the top right, and then close that. So now that we have the page number there, or the header, both of these are separate items. You could see 1 and 2, and if I go to the next page, 3, and this will keep up. And if we wrote anything after here, or if we wrote anything in the header space, as we did a moment ago, this would show automatically on any pages. The footer works the same way. You would just go to the insert, add the footer as you want, add any information, and then exit that header and footer editing portion. And then you'd be all set to go on that end. Afterwards, if we have this, we've headed it, we've made our bullet points and such, we've made a very rudimentary resume. We're now able to change how the text looks, which is very important, keeping in mind that even though you're maybe bolding, underlining, italicizing, you want to keep the same font throughout the document. That's not generally a good way to make things stand out when you're using different fonts, or one of the more creative fonts perhaps. That generally is not a good idea for any professional work, so you don't want to do any of that. But again, we can go through here, we can do things like underlining the title. You want to review the whole document. You want to go from the top and go through it and be as precise with everything as you choose to be, but it would be suggested when you're doing something like a resume that you're going to print out copies of or email to individuals that you're trying to show your best self to, you want to make sure that you go through the whole thing multiple times, and as well as using the review tools that we spoke of briefly before. Something like that spelling and grammar check, something like the thesaurus, if you're rewording your documents, or rereading your documents, sorry, and you want to change the name of, or change the wording of your document. You might want to change workplace, for example. Use that thesaurus again. We already have workplace listed here because we have it highlighted. Just like before, we can either highlight things afterwards or before, and Word or whatever program you're using will generally take that into consideration, so we don't even have to type in the word over here. And we can say, instead of workplace, maybe in the office, if that sounds better for what you are applying to. But for something like that, it's going to be very specific on the position that you find yourself in or find yourself wanting to be in. So, we have that. We have the cover letter. We have everything else. Now, when we're finishing the document, after we've gone through, we've made our work history, let's say just to make a full test document, we'll probably want to throw our education down here. Something like that, if we wanted to do, we should be able to do this guy right here. Oops, that's not what I meant to do. Just a moment. Change that. Now, if we wanted to make sure that we had the same format across the whole idea for something like our headings between every section, maybe we have our education here underneath the work history, and we want to make sure that this looks exactly like our other heading, so that way everything looks proper, so that way it doesn't come across as odd when you're reading it. You don't want something to be out of place catching their eye. You want the content to be catching their eye when they're reading a document such as a resume. So if we have this heading selected, we use the format painter, we just do that right there. So all I did there is I had this highlighted, whatever section that I want to copy the formatting, and the formatting is going to apply to the text, the size of the text, and any of the options that we have here at the top, such as the bolding or the color or anything like that. That's all in the format. And then I clicked on the format painter. Now we see that that is selected, and we'll just drag that over whatever we want. Or maybe we want to change the statement at the top. The same process applies. And it will also keep the indentation, but we obviously want that one centered in this example, or that's where we had it before. So if we have our education here, and we keeping in mind that this is also proper font and everything like that, we have our college and whatever we did there, maybe classes you studied if they applied in high school. The years that you went would be very helpful here if we do something like 2015 through 2019. Maybe you're getting out in the spring this year or something like that. So we have that option, and then of course put whatever information here that applies to you would be very helpful. So we have the education, we have our statement, we have our work history, even though I hope everybody has a little bit more work history than myself here. I'm not very precise apparently. But if you have all of this, and we've already reviewed the document, we see that we have the page numbers if we want it, or the headers, more likely if we were going for the resume, if we wanted to do something like this and do Anakowski resume, maybe tab that over to the right side. Anytime we want to do any of the indents or any moving of the items, the tab key on the left side of your keyboard is very helpful for that. We don't want to change any of the spacing or anything like that. And from here, we have the whole document, and any other text or anything like that we might be concerned with, you would put in here. You put in all your work history, all your education history that you find is important, or that you've been suggested to put in there. Use that review key. I can't emphasize enough that you want to make sure that everything is proper, and this is a few very helpful items. If we were typing up a document, maybe the word count is more helpful to somebody else, but for the sake of a resume, we want to use that spelling and grammar check for sure. And again, it's going to come up with my last name. We don't need to worry about that, but since my last name is going to come up multiple times, we could just use this ignore all, and now we don't have to worry about that. Now, that item, while we may have already gone through the document with our own eyes multiple times, that item will automatically, the spelling and grammar will automatically go through the entire document very quickly and tell us any of the errors, if something's out of place, if you've missed punctuation, items like that that do stand out to people sometimes if they're reading your documents very closely. You want to make sure that that's not affecting their opinion of you. From here, we've already gone through all the other items that are specific towards resumes and the like. We do have other options maybe in the layout panel that would be helpful for you in terms of the size of the paper, the orientation, but those are not items that are generally affecting your resume, so maybe we'll come back to those at a different time if we're getting a little bit more artistic in Word, rather than just using it for resume development. So we've already gone through this. We can see our document. Maybe you can use this view panel while you're looking through it if it helps you review everything a little bit easier. Yeah, looks like we're having a little bit of a connection issue. But something like this, if we did the read mode, this will be an easier way to maybe go through your whole document while you are reviewing it. and this is a completely separate screen, and this will show us every part of the document, and then this might be easier for you to find anything that you want to change through the document. Now if we, whoops, go back to edit document, go back to that view key and then the edit. So we went from read mode to view edit document. From here, we're back to being able to navigate as we want to be. And we're pretty much done with the document. We're done with our resume. We've made it. We got the cover letter going. Everything is peachy. Now, we'll probably want to save it. So if we go to File and Save, this is in Word 2016, of course, so it might look a little bit different to older versions, but this will be a very common version you'll see around, as well as if you come to our Job Connection Center here at the Madison Avenue location, where we would be happy to help you with all of this. We can just go to this PC, maybe put it into My Documents, and we'll do the resume, whatever you would like to name the document. If you're posting this on your LinkedIn or any websites, or putting it onto an employer's website when you are applying to their positions, you want to make sure it has a clear name that probably has your name in the document, just so it comes through as proper, and so that way they know what they're looking at when they're reading it. So that's saved. We know it's saved because it went from a generic name of document up here to whatever we saved it as. And so now we can safely exit, and we're out of here. So now we have a resume made. We used Word. We figured out how to bold things, how to italicize, how to indent, use bullet points and numbering, header and footer, very helpful, and page numbering, as well as just formatting the text and making easier ways of going about that. So I hope in our first little session here, you've learned something about using Word, and perhaps it helps you make a better resume when you're applying for your next position. Again, I can't emphasize enough that we would be happy to help you at our Job Connection Centers. We have one at our DeVoe location as well as our Madison Avenue location, and you can find out more information on those at our website, goodwillnwohio.com. And we have a team of people that are ready to help you, but in the meantime, or while you're trying to do things yourself, using skills that you find in this video as well as other future videos that we'll do, we hope that those will also help you. Now, if you have any suggestions for future videos or topics you would like discussed, we do assume that we will be getting through the entire Microsoft Office collection, or at least the main programs that you'll find, like Excel, Outlook, and Word, and potentially PowerPoint. But then we will also go into more computer-heavy topics for those that are looking to get a little bit more into IT, perhaps, or items such as that. So hopefully you enjoyed yourself a little bit, and if you want to leave any suggestions, please do, or contact us. Again, going through that website would probably be the best bet, but we also have our Facebook page and the YouTube channel here. And thanks for watching.